Back here on CBS Sports HQ, week 3 of college football officially in the books, and we're getting a look at the latest college football power rankings. According to CBS Sports, the Dogs, they are in that top spot despite having a really close call with Kentucky. Texas is at number 2. Some notable news from 24/7's Chip Brown. By the way, Quinn Ewers, week to week with an abdominal strain. It seems like Arch Manning can still keep that team afloat. The Buckeyes rounding out the top 3. Nico Iamaleava and the Vols at number 4, and the U rounding out the top 5.
And we did get some news this morning with Michigan set to start Alex Orji at quarterback against USC this week. Coach Sharon Moore announcing that today. Orji takes over from walk-on quarterback Davis Warren, who started the first 3 games of the season for the Wolverines, but threw 3 interceptions in that weekend win. And it will be Orji under center this week as he gets his shot to be the starting quarterback with the Wolverines. All right, so let's welcome in Danny Kanell and Brandon Marcello here from 24/7 Sports to discuss the power rankings and, of course, this latest news. You had the Wolverines in the power rankings at 19. Coming into the show, we were thinking, okay, we got some QB questions here at Michigan, but they've been answered. Danny, it's going to be Alex Orji under center for the Wolverines. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not super surprised. Sometimes your play makes it really an easy decision on a coach of whether to play you or not. And Davis Warren struggled mightily this past weekend. He struggled mightily against Texas, and it just looks like the moments are too big for him, and even some of the throws are too big for him, and just does not look comfortable in that pocket. So I think Sharon Moore had no choice but to go ahead and go with Alex Orji, who I'll remind people, like, this was the guy all of us all offseason had said, oh yeah, this is the starter. Like every preseason publication, everything you looked at had Alex Orji in there as the starting quarterback for Michigan. So I do think the one benefit of that is they do have an entire offense that should be built around him, which I think will be a much more run-oriented offense, which will challenge USC's defense to say, you know what, we're coming at you. We are going to line up, and we're going to bring in probably an extra lineman, and we're going to bring in a couple extra tight ends, and we're going to just try to smash it right down your throat. And USC, yes, they lived up to that challenge against LSU, but I think Michigan is really going to try to shorten the length of this game by controlling the line of scrimmage, and they feel like what gives them the best chance to win is going with Alex Orji.
Now, Michigan prepared all offseason to bring this whole offense around Alex Orji's strength, which is running the football. Listen, he's only attempted 7 career passes there at Michigan. He threw a touchdown pass this past week against Arkansas State, but the offense was kind of herky-jerky still underneath him. He overthrew 1 pass really badly later in the game. So he's not someone I'm expecting to be throwing the ball 18, 20 times a game. They're going to have to run him a little bit. And also get the running backs going a little bit more. Mullings has really kind of come on here of late, and they have refocused on wanting to run the ball at Michigan after that Texas game. That's how they're going to win ball games this year. They're going to have to run the ball and do so effectively. I'm still waiting for Donovan Edwards to really get sparked here and get going and be that #1 running back that we all have been hoped and promised for the last year or two. They've got to do things in the running game. Alex Orji, don't make him do too much down the field throwing the ball. You got to take a couple of shots, but that's not his strength, obviously. This Michigan team can run the ball, and they need to focus on that.
And you can watch Michigan in action with Alex Orji against USC in that Big Ten matchup on CBS, also streaming on Paramount Plus this weekend. Let's go to number 14 on the power rankings. We have Kansas State, and we were all waiting for Avery Johnson to kind of unleash. I think Chip Patterson called it an unboxing of Avery Johnson that he was waiting to watch. We finally got a taste of it, gentlemen, against Arizona. Brandon, I'll start with you, because if Avery Johnson keeps playing that way and we keep seeing that sort of performance, what do you think their ceiling is in general, and then, of course, as it relates to the power rankings as well?
Well, their ceiling's to win the Big 12 title. They're one of the more veteran teams outside of Avery Johnson. He's got great pieces around him. He's got 2 stellar running backs behind him that they can really lean on, and they both complement each other as well. You know, when I look at the bigger picture here, when we talk about the transfer portal, man, 3 teams really did well by losing their quarterbacks, right? Kyle McCord leaves Ohio State, upgrades Syracuse. Will Howard leaves Kansas State, upgrades Ohio State, and Avery Johnson's able to move up the depth chart by default at Kansas State, where he was deemed the future anyway. All 3 teams better for it. Very rare in this day and age in the transfer portal. You lose someone, you actually upgrade. But those 3 teams and the domino effect really have done a great job this season.
Yeah, I think this was one of the more interesting moves. We've seen a lot of schools say, you know what, we're going to bet on our future as opposed to paying a guy to stay around. We saw that happen at Oklahoma with Dylan Gabriel going to Oregon, and they decided to go with Jackson Arnold. And of course, we see what Kansas State did and Chris Kleiman telling Will Howard, you know what, we like this Avery Johnson guy. We're going to give him some reps. And Will Howard said, okay, I'll go to Ohio State. And I think the thing that we saw, and Jacqueline, you guys all alluded to this, the first couple games, the offense was good, but it felt like they were keeping this under wraps. When you've got a quarterback who runs a 4.4, that you would utilize his legs a little bit more. And when you do that, it just opens up so much more in the offense, because I do think that'll be the area that they kind of, when they start getting the balance, is when Kansas State becomes most dangerous. And he was able to throw it against Tulane. Now he was able to run it against Arizona. And then defenses have to prepare for both. That's the best of both worlds. And what I think is interesting about Kansas State, the ceiling here being the Big 12, totally agree with Brandon. But considering what's going on with Utah, with Cam Rising, this injury to his hand, which no one's really 100% sure what does it mean, what impact it could have on him. I thought they were the heavy favorite, and deservedly so, because Cam Rising was back. That injury brings into doubt that, stranglehold they have on the top of the Big 12, and I think Kansas State will be the team to challenge them.
Ohio State was on a bye this week. They stay at the number 3 spot in the power rankings and in the AP poll. This week, they get Marshall. But, Danny, Tennessee is a team that's right there at 4, chasing them. On the Cover 3 podcast, Tom Fornelli has called Tennessee a wagon. He's put us on wagon alert for this season, that this Tennessee team is a monster. So, Danny, I'll ask you, how tight is the margin between 3rd and 4th here, with Tennessee kind of creeping up, and a ranked game this week against Oklahoma?
Jeremy, that's the biggest thing to me. Is I think Ohio State's good, but I have no idea, because they haven't been tested like a lot of these other teams in the top 5 and top 10 have been. Their strength of schedule to this point is 127th. Now, they've only played 2 games and they played cakewalks, but guess what? They play another one this upcoming weekend against Marshall. And so I really don't think Ohio State will really convince any critics like myself until they probably face Iowa, and then of course the game October 12th in Eugene against Oregon's when we'll really find out what this Ohio State team is all about. And again, all you can do is handle what's on your schedule and play well against them. They've handled their business, but I hate the scheduling here, so I will hold it against them. And Tennessee has a massive opportunity where I know we're going to get to it. And we've seen the AP voters flip-flop 1 and 2, putting Texas over Georgia. I think if Tennessee goes out there and beats Oklahoma in Norman, Nebraska for yet another resume builder after already beating NC State neutral pretty convincingly, that Ohio State could be in jeopardy of jumping again. But I would caution everybody. I think the AP voters are kind of taking a little bit of a different approach, which I like, of being more willing to be flexible throughout the season and jockey teams around until we get to like week 6 or 7.
Yeah, I agree. But you also, the crispest offenses I've seen out there have also been the teams that have not played really great schedules. That's been Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Ohio State. Ohio State, though, just seems to conduct their business no matter what the situation is. I really like the approach this team has taken there right now. But until they just really ramp up the Big Ten schedule, you're right, they're going to hover around that 3 to 4 spot, maybe drop a spot or two. And spoiler alert, in my power rankings, Ohio State's probably going to drop next week if Tennessee goes on the road and wins convincingly at OU, like a lot of people seem to think with that offense. But remember, Tennessee hasn't been challenged at all this year. In fact, they played a terrible Kent State team this past week. They even tried an onside kick against Kent State when they were up 30-0. I guess they're just trying every little thing out just in case down the road they need to try things. But Tennessee looks great to me right now. But Ohio State and Ole Miss, those 3 teams to me, probably the most on-track programs when it comes to their offenses, but they haven't really faced anybody either.
Brandon, we just saw the top 10 there. In Georgia, they are still in that top spot despite having a really close call with Kentucky. And Texas looks really good. They have a big test coming up in Oklahoma. On the other hand, Georgia, they have a bye week to kind of get right before a big test in Bama. But why not Texas at number 1 in your power rankings at this point in the season?
Well, I want to see Texas open up SEC play here first as well. And then I know it's a huge win at Michigan, but Michigan obviously is not what they were last year, nowhere close to that. And the argument can be made, obviously, Georgia hasn't necessarily played a tough road game yet. And then you couple that with them going on the road, a Kentucky team that's below average this year, and they struggle. everybody's kind of quick to go, let's just go ahead and drop them a spot here and then wait until they play Alabama in 2 weeks to see if they actually are number one. Not me. I saw what they did to a very, very, very good Clemson team in Atlanta, up close and personal. They did a great job in that game, blew them out, and a Clemson team that I think is going to challenge for the ACC championship still. And then you also have to look at what Georgia did at Kentucky. Yes, they struggled, but I'm telling you, every single year under Kirby Smart, they have some type of issue in one game against a former SEC East Division opponent. And he said all week going into it that this is going to be that game. Kentucky's the most physical team they're going to face out of that old East Division for them. And sure enough, that was true. They still got what they needed to do to win the game. I'm not overly concerned with Georgia because I saw enough in their first 2 games to make me believe that they are the number 1 team in the country.
Oh, Brandon, don't be scared. Just jump Texas over them. Just do it now.
No.
They look better. So here's what I worry about, Brandon, for Georgia, and I agree with you. I think their resume, like Ohio State fans were saying, hey, that game against Kentucky was awful. Put us over them, too. Jump us over them. They haven't played anybody. You do bring up a great point because they dominated Clemson. The injuries are starting to pile up. It's just something to keep an eye on. Michael Williams on the defensive side of the ball has been missing. Tate Radledge, one of their better offensive linemen, a guard, just announced earlier today that he was going to be out for a while. They're starting to mount up for the Bulldogs. And the one thing that concerns me, and I do want to see how this emerges, is I do think Carson Beck is missing his security blanket, that Brock Bowers or Ladd McConkey type target that he went to anytime there was a game that was close. And I go back to that Auburn game, which was close, and then they pulled away once Brock Bowers kind of went off on him. I'm still kind of waiting for that offense sort of to find its identity. I think they're still struggling, and it's only going to get harder with that offensive line injury. So I'm going to go ahead and say Texas is the best team in the country right now because of the win that they had on the road at Michigan, but also how they've dominated every other opponent and now showcasing depth at the most important position of the game. I like Texas as number 1.
Last week, Danny said Quinn Ewers was playing like the number 1 pick in the draft, and now he's saying Texas, the number 1 team in the nation. Love it. Danny Kanell, Brandon Marcello joining us to discuss Brandon's latest edition of his Power Rankings. You can catch those over on CBSSports.com. And Danny, of course, part of the Cover 3 podcast. I think today is upon further review where they kind of look back at what happened over the course of the weekend. The live reaction show on Saturday night, you can listen to it Saturday Night Live or on Sunday. It is a great listen, a great recap for you of everything that's going on in college football in week 3. Download and follow wherever you get your pods or scan that QR code. You can get that latest episode right now.